Hi, I'm Diana Sullivan. I'm posting some sample lessons from my beginning machine knitting course. Check out this lesson and then consider getting all 35 lessons either on 2 DVDs or on a USB flash drive. Doing these lessons can really jumpstart your skills and your confidence. Click on the link for this course as well as all my patterns and products. Suppose for some reason or other you're knitting along and your carriage jams, that is, it just stops in the middle of a row. Do not force it. What you need is to get the carriage off, and you want to do it without damaging the sinker plate, the carriage, or the needles and knitting underneath. The first thing to do is to loosen these 2 screws on the sinker plate so that you can remove the sinker plate. After they're loose, you just gently lift up on the sinker plate and move it out from the stitches. Then you can open the little door and unthread the yarn. Set the sinker plate aside. That gets it off the knitting without damaging the knitting, the needles, or the carriage. Then there's a wheel on the carriage that you can turn. Different brands have different ways to release the carriage. It's normally on N or KC, but when the carriage is jammed and I need to get it off the bed without pushing it in either direction, I turn it to CR, which in my mind I think of as carriage release. So I've rotated that all the way around, and once I've done that, the carriage can come right off and be set aside. Now normally when your carriage has jammed, a few of your needles have knitted and a few of them haven't. What you want to do is back up to the beginning of the row. So you just pull the yarn a little bit and lift up. The farthest needle over, usually you'll have to pull a little bit toward the side and then do the movement to rip out a stitch. So that gets me back to the beginning of the row. Now I need to look at the individual needles and see whether or not the knitting is behind the needle latches or not. Well, for these first few needles, the knitting is safely in the hook. It's not going to come off, but then I notice on this needle right here that the knitting is behind the latch. I want all of the knitting to be inside the hooks safely. So what I'm going to do is use a transfer tool and put the knitting safely inside the hooks. I lay the transfer tool eye over the hook of the needle, push back, pull out a little bit and lift up, and I get it very quickly back into the hooks of the needle. And you could bring them all out to hold position and open the latches, and you can do them quickly. Do 3 at a time. Now once all the knit stitches are safely in the hooks, you've recovered from your carriage jamming. You could put the carriage back on the machine over on this side, the side where the yarn's coming from, and you could continue to knit. But suppose that you needed to rip out. To rip out a whole row quickly, for instance, say you needed to rip out 3 rows for some reason. It might not be because your carriage jammed. You might have gone 3 rows too far. Or you might see some little thing 3 rows down that you want to fix or change. So to do that, we're going to pull on the yarn and watch the stitches climb up the needles. Let me show you how to do that. First of all, use the needle pusher and push the needles back so that the stitches are hard against the gate pegs. You do this each time you rip a row. Then you grab the yarn and you pull toward the side while lifting up, and you'll very quickly lift out a whole row. When you get to the far end though, you usually have to grab the stitch from underneath, pull to the side, and then just gently work out that last stitch. Now I want to rip out 3 rows. I could keep ripping, but the fast, easy way is to grab my pusher again and push them all back again. They just rip better that way. And I can pull out the 2nd row. Now, I strongly encourage you to practice ripping. If you get good at ripping, it'll just be so much easier on that day when you discover that you really do need to rip. So now I've ripped out my 3 rows. Of course, once I rip out a bunch of rows, I have some loose slack yarn hanging here. But that's easily remedied. I reach behind the machine and I'm just pulling the back of the upper tension unit yarn. I'm just pulling it back in the back, and that makes it come up in the front. So I have fixed that. Now another thing that can go wrong while you're knitting is you could accidentally drop some stitches. For instance, I just did this process, but maybe I didn't realize that one of the stitches was behind the latch and I poked it back. Well, it'll come right off and it'll drop. It'll even start to run and form a ladder. So let's say I've got a couple of stitches that are off the hooks. The best tool to fix that is the latch tool. I'm going to get in close and show how to do that. What I want to do is take the latch tool and put it behind the knitting, reach down and catch the stitch with the hook. Then I slide the latch tool in far enough so that the latch is below that stitch, and I can twist it a little and come up so that I catch the first ladder inside the latch. Do you see it inside the latch? Then when I lift up, I've knitted that stitch again. The latch tool is imitating one of the machine needles. Now I have another ladder, so I'm going to slip down far enough so that the knitted stitch is behind the latch, twist it again, pick it up, and then I'll just take my open machine hook, bring it out, and just lay it on there. That picked up 1 stitch. Now I had 2 stitches. There's one dropped over here. Sometimes it's helpful to grab it, pinch it between your finger and your thumb, and then you can get it from the front and you can get it on a needle that way. But if it's down 4 or 5 rows, you will have to pick it up 1 row at a time with the latch tool. So that shows you how to repair a small disaster when your carriage is jammed, or if you have to rip out a few rows, or if you have to repair a dropped stitch. And I really hope you'll practice it, because it'll be much easier when you actually have a mistake to fix it if you've already practiced doing it when there's no stress. If you like the sample lesson, consider getting the whole course, which is available at www.dianaknits.com. And did you know I have hundreds of machine knitting videos on YouTube? Check out my channel, Diana Knits, and subscribe. I also have a blog and a Facebook group. These are all free resources to help you on your machine knitting journey.